Welcome to Ziffity Quick Chat.
The customer of the B2B company is demanding e-commerce. So I don't believe this is, the death of a salesperson. But, ultimately it's about the leadership making difficult change and facing uncertainty. If you're uncomfortable, that's a good thing. It's now a mandate. It's no longer an option to be in e-commerce if you're in B2B. There is so much ROI in e-commerce for B2B companies, and it comes from many places.
If at all a company has decided to take the digital commerce plunge and they are preparing to plan their e-commerce transition. So what would be your tips for such a B2B company in order to plan or prepare for their e-commerce transformation from ground up?
Well, the first thing, the very, very first thing you need is to have that leadership buy-in we just talked about, right? Yeah. If we don't have to prove e-commerce. E-commerce is proven, and sometimes I hear from companies, hey, we want to do a proof of concept. We want to, you don't need to do a proof of concept of e-commerce. Yeah. Your customers already want it, and we could talk about different use cases and the role, the extent they want to transact online versus offline. But at the end of the day, digital is the way the new consumer or new business buyer, is transacting with you. So number one, you need to have that leadership buy-in. So check that off the list. The second then is you need to have your customers involved, right? So and you notice I'm not talking about tech yet, because I'll talk about that in a moment. But really, the key things are really business oriented and strategy questions. The customer, who is your customer and how do they want to interact with you? And involving your customer in the process is critical. Some of the most successful e-commerce and digital transformation rollouts that I've been involved with over the last 5 years in B2B have had heavy involvement. I'll give you an example. My book, again, the book is called $1 Billion B2B E-commerce, by the way. In the book, I have several case studies from a company called Illumina. Illumina is a $3 billion biotechnology company. They're a manufacturer of equipment. It's fascinating what they do. They sequence the human genome. They make equipment that, if you've ever gone to something like a 23andMe or what they call gene sequencing or DNA sequencing service, they use Illumina's equipment to tell you all about your background, your DNA, your makeup, et cetera. And so Illumina, it sounds like a very unlikely candidate, right, for e-commerce transactions. They're selling $1 million machines. So, it's an unlikely candidate. But fact of the matter is, when they rolled out e-commerce, we're going back close to 5 years ago, they really involved the customer all the way through the process, all the way from setting the requirements of what the site needs to do, to gaining alignment on how the customer wanted to use the system, what were the most important features, how they needed to integrate into their systems, those sorts of things. And today, Illumina, this is one of the key reasons they succeeded, is they're getting almost half of their revenue, over $1 billion from e-commerce, which is enormous. It's a huge company, and it's transformational in many regards. It's not just about the transactions. They're getting incremental value, incremental share of wallet from their customer. They're reaching new customers using the web. So so my number two, factor for success is involving the customers. The third factor of success is sales team. You need the sales team and other parts of the organization aligned with you. If your sales team, when you roll out e-commerce, as I think about B2B, right, a lot of these companies have very large traditional direct sales teams, physical salespeople. And if the physical salespeople are not directly sort of aligned with what you're doing in e-commerce, your implementation will likely fail because they'll fight against it. It's viewed as competitive, or can be. It doesn't have to be. It's actually the sales team's best friend when it's done right. And so that's a third criteria. And then after you get sort of those things, and again, getting back to Illumina, They align the sales team right from the beginning. They had them involved in the whole process. So those are three things that I think are critical to get started. Then you start getting into technology. You need to have the right tech. You need to have the right infrastructure. You need to take your time and select your platform carefully, your partners, like Ziffity. You need to select your partner really carefully as you go through the process. And so number four really is you start getting into the nuts and bolts of tech. You've got to get the business stuff nailed down first, or you're not going to succeed with the tech. It doesn't matter if you have an amazing website, amazing e-commerce, digital experience. If you don't have the alignment of the organization, your customers, you're not doing it for your customers and your leadership isn't behind it, don't even bother starting. So anyway, just a few thoughts there for your listeners.
Yeah, the success story of Illumina is a real good example of how B2B companies, even if they have complex product offerings, can get into e-commerce and taste real success. And you also reiterated the fact that e-commerce is not going to sunset a sales team in a B2B company. And in fact, it will actually complement the sales team. Those are two very good takeaways for audience, I guess. And we'll get into the last question of the day, Brian, and it's a quite futuristic question. Like B2B has been playing catch up with B2C for almost many years now. So whatever trend that comes into B2C, it turns out to be a mandate in B2C, and then it transcends to the B2B industry. So take, for example, buy online and pick up in store feature. I mean, like it was introduced in B2C and it became a mandate in B2C, and now B2B players are also interested in offering it. I mean, like, and many other do-it-yourself functionalities and features in e-commerce. So that has been the case so far. My question is like, is there any chance for the B2B industry to evolve on its own, or produce some digital experiences on its own? Or apart from digital experiences, is there possibilities for B2B e-commerce to come out with its own trend or whatever? Yeah, that's the question, Brian.
Absolutely, Ram. It's a great question. First of all, what's most people don't realize is that B2B e-commerce is actually 2.5 times the size in terms of sheer transactional volume versus B2C. So number one, there's a lot of volume already happening there, but at the end of the day, we're just scratching the surface because B2B is behind B2C in many ways. That said, I believe very strongly that B2B has just enormous opportunities to even leapfrog and do much more innovative and interesting things than B2C. In fact, we're starting to see that happen. B2B is branching out and creating its own path. The companies that have really embraced digital transformation and are significantly down the curve can then take the digital infrastructure they have in place, the e-commerce infrastructure, once they have the foundation in place, they can take that and then create entirely new businesses. It's absolutely amazing what can happen. And part of it, and I'll give you an example in a moment, but part of it is because of the nature of B2B, right? You've got these deep traditional relationships where there is a deep understanding of the customer in a way that's actually very hard to achieve in consumer, right? Consumers are more, they're more fickle, they change their minds. It's more about, the adventure of shopping, et cetera. But when you have a B2B relationship, you're talking about someone's business, their livelihood, the success of the business. And by enabling and using digital tools and enabling, transactions and other things and processes digitally, you can help your customers become better at their own business. I'm going to give you an example. The last case study, I think it's the last case study in my book, is a company called Bosch, Robert Bosch, which you may be aware of Bosch. It's a multinational manufacturer of tools and other things. Well, Bosch put a lot of the foundational elements in place years ago for e-commerce as a manufacturer.
Okay.
And what they've been able to do since they've launched that, a few years ago, they launched something called Bluetooth. It's a Bluetooth-based asset tracking system, right? And then this tracking system, what they've done, they've taken and they've embedded tracking into the tools, as well as providing assets for them, for customers, their customers, to place on equipment in the field. So a lot of their customers, Bosch's customers, are construction companies. These are big, large construction companies building big commercial skyscrapers and developments and other things. It turns out that one of the biggest costs that these customers have is labor, and matching labor to the equipment that's in the field, that's being utilized in the field. What they realized, based on their long relationships with these customers, is that they could help these customers better match the location of the equipment to their labor pool. They would then be able to reduce their costs and be more efficient in how they delivered their services. I'm talking about the construction company. So what this Bluetooth tracking system, what they've done with it, they've created software around it so that the customer, the contractor, can then match the labor to the assets. And it's remarkable. They're saving now their customer on one of their biggest costs, which again is a matching of these assets together, so that they're more efficient. And they're improving their customers' business. At the same time, they've also opened up a new services and software platform for their own business. So Bosch is now able to charge something to their customer, bring value to their customer, increase loyalty from their customer. But none of this would have been possible if they didn't have the digital infrastructure in place to start with, to facilitate all this communication and back and forth. And so it's e-commerce enabled, but it's not just about e-commerce. It's about moving to the next level with your business. So that's what I mean by businesses like they're in the B2B field, being able to leapfrog what some consumer businesses are doing, and our B2C e-commerce field. So that's just one example. I have many others. Illumina has done some similar things with a My Illumina dashboard, integrating technology right into the equipment that they're selling, so that their researchers using their equipment in the labs can actually get better lab results as they run experiments on their through their machines. And it's incredible when you think about, particularly in the equipment side, the potential for IoT, Internet of Things, has, and when integrated into a robust digital infrastructure. So this is all next generation future proofing stuff, but you gotta think about your foundation. So many B2B companies, Ram, don't have the basics in place, and frankly, that's where you have to start. So anyway, I hope that's helpful as an example.
Yeah. That was really good, actually. It's almost like a future tech, and I have heard of companies like Earth Moving, JCB, and all, using IoT to directly find or identify issues in their machines and all while they are at work in the field. So yeah, that would be a very good example, actually, for our audience. Yeah. So
yeah, predictive maintenance. Yeah, exactly right. Preventative maintenance. Sorry. Right. So keep the machines running. That's another big one. Yep.
Yeah, it's like a direct feed from the machines in the field to your lab. It's like a lot of valuable data and a lot of time saved, actually. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, you nailed it. That's exactly right.
Well, thanks a lot, Brian. Those were really good points that you have highlighted, and I guess your perspectives, opinions, and real e-commerce success stories would have answered a lot of concerning questions that our audiences had in their mind. And it was great interacting with you, and we're looking forward to catching up with you very soon, Brian. Thanks a lot for your time. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Ram, for having me.